Throughout the Second World War, there were many horrific and terrifying guards who worked inside of the concentration camps. Many men and women were called to serve as part of the SS inside of camps such as Bergen-Belsen, Dachau and Auschwitz, and they became known as some of the most sadistic war criminals in history. They caused and contributed to the executions, torture and slaughter of millions of people. And at the end of the war, there were many people who were horrified to see how many of the war criminals who had been sentenced to death for crimes against humanity were just young women in their 20s when they were led towards the gallows. Most of these women had been ardent Nazis, and they were ruthless in their actions, which caused terror. And of the 50,000 guards who served inside of the Nazi concentration camps, around 10% of these, roughly 5,000, were women who were there to oversee the female camps inside of different sites. These were dangerous women who had grown up and been indoctrinated by the Nazi youth groups and by the policies of Hitler and his government. And they joined in with the extermination of certain groups in Europe. They became Aufseherin, or female overseers, and some of the most notorious women, such as Irma Grese, were known to have executed and killed with their own bare hands. But why did women join the concentration camp staff, and what punishments did they receive at the end of the war? The Nazis had a specific target in mind and demographic for those women who they wanted to work inside of the concentration camps. They targeted female guards to come from the lower or middle class, but they did not have any specific job requirements and experience requirements for them to work inside of the concentration camps. Many women who went on to work in the camps came from different walks of life and jobs. Some worked on the railways or in towns on the trams as conductors, and others were former teachers and members of the medical profession, such as nurses. There were even some hairdressers who were drawn into the work into the camps, and there was even a female opera singer who gave up her career to work for the SS. Lots of women joined what was known as the SS WWII, and there was a collection of women who could be called up to serve for the Nazis inside of different industries and positions, and they were attracted to this because of the financial incentives and the pay which was offered. The women worked out that they could earn significantly greater sums of money inside of the SS than by doing their normal jobs, and advertisements were placed inside of towns and cities to recruit German women to serve for their beloved German Reich and to join the support organisations for the women of the SS. There were a number of people who were conscripted into the concentration camps to work as guards, and many of the women belonged to what was known as the Waffen-SS or the SS Helferinnen Corps, and female guards were known as SS Helper Women or SS Helferinnen, and they could obtain different ranks in the system. The highest rank was the Chief Senior Overseer, and the second highest was a position of a camp leader or a Lagerführerin. They also could become senior overseers, first guards, work recording leaders, block leaders, report leaders, and also an overseer, which was considered a rather normal rank of not too much power. The women were mostly known as Aufseherin, and there was a lower rank which was known as the Arrestführerin, and this was a job for women who were considered convicts or criminals who were sent from prisons to go and then work in the concentration camps as guards. But whilst they worked inside of the concentration camps, many of these women were encouraged by Heinrich Himmler to have relations with other male SS guards to create what was considered Aryan children of the master race, and Himmler wanted SS men to view these women as equals to them. But some women did go further, and some abused and had relations with prisoners, and there were accounts of some who were sacked from their jobs and were imprisoned for being discovered as having a physical relationship with the prisoners of the camp, breaking the strict rules on race inside of Hitler's Germany and the occupied lands of the Second World War. Irma Grese, who became one of the most barbaric women of the camps, was known as the hyena of Auschwitz, and Grese slept with SS men regularly, and she may have even had a physical relationship with Josef Mengele, the angel of death and terrifying doctor of Auschwitz. Some of the women had relationships with senior SS guards such as Hertha Breitmann Schmidt, who struck up a relationship with the commandant of Helmbrecht's subcamp, Wilhelm Durr, who was later executed at the end of the war as part of the concentration camps. There was one notorious woman who worked as a guard because of the involvement of her husband inside of the camp. Ilse Koch was the wife of the commandant of Buchenwald, Karl Otto Koch. He later was executed for the fact he embezzled money from the camp and ordered huge building projects for his wife, using Nazi money to benefit his wife's lifestyle. But Ilse Koch became known as the Witch of Buchenwald for her actions. She was later arrested and was locked up by the Allies for horrific crimes and was known for sending people to their deaths for just looking at her. But the majority of the women guards who served inside of various different concentration camps began their journeys inside of Ravensbrück camp. This was an all-female camp found relatively close to Berlin that replaced earlier female camps, and in total over 130,000 women passed through the camp during its operation. Many women were sent here by the SS to go and train and to learn from senior female guards such as Maria Mandel, and they were taught how to brutalize inmates and guards and how to instruct fear and terror onto them. A lot of women were broken here to terrorize the women such as Irma Grese. When she arrived, she was lambasted and told over very severely, as she apologized to one prisoner early on during her training. But it wasn't long until this was struck out of her, and she then became a sadistic murderer. Ravensbrück did have mostly women working there, alongside the groups of male prisoners, but 4,000 women were trained here. And then, when the time came to it, they were moved to other camps. When sites such as Auschwitz were expanded, women were summoned en masse to go and work there. But Ravensbrück was a tough camp also, and one woman described the conditions and the treatment of the prisoners as, "They didn't shoot the women. We were to die of misery, hunger and exhaustion. When we arrived at Ravensbrück, it was the worst. The first thing I saw was a cart with all the dead piled on it, the arms and legs hanging out, and mouths and eyes wide open. They reduced us to nothing. We didn't even feel like we had the value of cattle. You worked and you died." The amount of women who worked inside of the camps increased with the turning fates of the Germans during the Second World War, as when things went bad for them, the men who worked in the camps were sent to the front lines to fight. With the men being sent to fight, many women were then sent to camps. At Struthof concentration camp in Gdansk, there were women such as Jenny Wanda Bachmann and Elizabeth Becker who were called into the camps to work in 1944. And they only served for roughly a year, but they would be later executed for their crimes. At the end of the Second World War in Europe, many female guards were found amongst the surviving prisoners at camps such as Struthof and Bergen-Belsen, and they were then placed under arrest. At Belsen, many women were ordered to clean up the camps as they were forced to bury the corpses of their victims in mass pits. Women such as Grese and Johanna Bormann were arrested, and their stories and actions during the war were told to the world, and their crimes of sending people to their deaths in the gas chambers, as well as encouraging their dogs to attack prisoners, were told. Some of these women became infamous, but many were condemned for their actions, and they had their lives taken from them via executioners. But what was also true was, despite also 50,000 women serving inside of the concentration camp system, there were only a few who were ever brought to trial for their crimes, and still today many of these women are being searched for and recent court trials have occurred featuring former female staff who worked in the camp 80 years ago. Some received lenient treatment and sentences, such as Hermine Braunsteiner, who should have been condemned for her actions. She did not face execution as she should have, but Braunsteiner, the stomping mare, was known to have beaten prisoners to death, and she was seen throwing children onto the trucks when they delivered these young people to the concentration camps. One prisoner claimed about Braunsteiner's actions that, "I watched her administer 25 lashes with a riding crop to a young Russian girl suspected of having tried sabotage. Her back was full of lashes, but I was not allowed to treat her immediately." Emma Zimmer was a guard who was condemned for her actions, and she served inside of Auschwitz and sent many prisoners to the gas chambers. One of her former victims said, "Our supervisor was an old and mean SS woman called Emma Zimmer. She was vicious and dangerous and frightening us constantly with threats, proclaiming in a sadistic voice, 'I will report you and then you will go away. You know where? Just one way up the chimney.' We hated her, and we were scared of her." But the execution chambers all across Europe at the end of the Second World War saw many women who had worked inside the concentration camps being taken to their deaths. One woman was even shot by the Soviets, but many female guards were brought to trial, and they were then condemned following their date with the judges. Those women who worked at Struthof and who were sentenced to death were even executed on a huge set of gallows in front of a large crowd on a hill in public. But inside of occupied prisons such as Hamlein and Landsberg, there were executioners who used the gallows to execute women such as Irma Grese, Elisabeth Volkenrath, and Johanna Bormann, and others. Inside of the concentration camps of the Second World War, a lot of the female guards were as feared or more feared than the male guards, and they were known for inflicting such suffering and horror. But there were many women who chose to work in the camps for pay and other reasons, such as doing their duty to Hitler's Reich, which they had been ardently schooled in for some time. Also, there were some who were conscripted to do so, but some of the most brutal women were executed for their crimes. But many more never faced a day in court, and they escaped and managed to live out normal lives despite the suffering they caused during the war. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.